Hey, everybody, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Wednesday, the 9th of October. Today, I'd like to talk about provocative statements. And it seems to me that 25 years ago, when I was first beginning work in the church, we wouldn't ever think the idea of provocative statements never occurred to us. Like, I don't think anybody thought in terms of that, of making a statement that was meant to cause people to think hard. Maybe it was assumption that people just did think hard, that we used to think critically as part of what we do. There's been a lot of talk lately about universities, especially conversations coming from south of the border about the role of universities, and maybe they should just, that they're the bad guys. I understand that lots and lots of people have, they're blue collar workers, they've never gone to college or university, or people have gone to college for trades, for things like that. And that's awesome. We need all of those things. We also need universities. Without universities, we wouldn't have doctors, we wouldn't have priests, we wouldn't have lawyers, wouldn't have teachers, and all kinds of things. It's not an either or. It's a both and situation. But part of what, I mean, especially when people start, people can say to me, well, the teachers and lawyers and doctors and priests and things, you all pursue education to in a particular bent. It isn't just useless. It's, you're using your university education for a specific purpose. What about those like undergrads, like English or something like that? What use is that? Well, you know what? I have a 4-year honors degree in English, and it comes up in life quite often. It comes in quite handy for me. And it's not just about having read Shakespeare or poetry or Canadian or American literature. It's really about what my experience of university and the courses I took, not necessarily the life outside the courses, but the courses themselves taught me. Because they taught me to think critically, not to simply accept what I was being told as mere fact, because the person at the front of the classroom or on the other end of the Zoom camera was the subject matter expert. That's important. We need to have people teaching us who are indeed subject matter experts. And I think that this is where universities can help. And I know that trade schools and colleges also have subject matter experts. But there is something to be said, and I think that every level of education should have an aspect of teaching people to think critically, no matter what level of education it is. But as someone who didn't go to trade school and I didn't go to college, community college in the Canadian sense, but went to university in the Canadian sense, I can only speak to what I know. And what I know is that in my first couple of years of university, whether it was blatant, and one of them it was the theory of criticism, and that is not telling somebody that their purple shirt doesn't match their pink pants or something like that. The theory of criticism was about being able to look at different statements, different essays, different people speaking, and be able to analyze what they've said and balance what we know and what they have shared with, does it make sense? Is it appropriate in this context? How does it challenge me to learn something new? Can I challenge that? What I've heard or what I've listened to or what I've read? How can I relate? How can I have a conversation with that subject, so to speak? It taught this theory of criticism, taught me to actually take a look at things and not take them at face value. To be able to say, I don't know about that, or I disagree with that. That I understand. I agree with that. Because it wasn't about agreeing with a fact. It was engaging with an argument, with an ethic, with a moral, with things that were not necessarily two. I'm not going to argue that 2 plus 2 is 4, because you can't criticize that. It's just true. 2 plus 2 is 4. You can engage in conversation about what you think about gender differences. You can engage in conversation in what you think about medical assistance in death and dying. You can engage in conversation about whether or not sports stars, sports athletes should be paid millions and millions and millions of dollars. These are all things that we can have a conversation about, and we can hold differing opinions. And learning learning about critical thinking is what helps me to make decisions in the work I now do. It helps me to think beyond my own preconceived notions, to think beyond my own preconceived opinions about things, to think just because I like this, does that make that other person's thought, practice, decision wrong? Or does it just bump up against what I think? Because those are two different things. Thinking about something critically allows us the ability to see what is good and bad in someone else's thinking, but also to see that reflected in our own. And that's really important these days. Obviously, I'm thinking about that with politics, both to the south and politics that will be coming soon enough to the north. But in the church world, especially in the Anglican Church of Canada world, I'm thinking about that in these provocative statements that the Primates Commission has created. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Primate is the lead bishop of the Anglican Church of Canada, first among equals. The Primate doesn't have the ability to tell me as a diocesan bishop what to do. But the Primate is the person who convenes the gathering of bishops, the person who convenes the gatherings of the national church together for us to pray together, to research together, to critically think together, to determine what are some common ways that we can join in moving forward as the Anglican Church of Canada, and how will we continue to be the Anglican Church of Canada even when each diocese might do something a little bit different. So the very fact that we have a person who is called apart, set apart to facilitate these things, in and of itself means that we have to have critical thinking. And the Primates Commission, the Primate who has just retired, Primate Linda Nichols, called together a commission, a task force, to talk about the future of the church and some of the structures of our church. And they created these 7 provocative statements. And I had the privilege last Saturday of having a Zoom conversation with people from Western Canada, from the province of the Northern Lights, which is an ecclesiastical province that includes Alberta, the Arctic, so Northwest Territories and Nunavut, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, parts of Ontario, parts of northern part of Quebec, and Labrador as well. And we had this conversation about these provocative statements. And they asked us, that the speakers were telling us, listen, we created these statements not because we agree with them or disagree with them, but because we wanted to engage people in critical thinking. We wanted people to think about the church as it is, and to have some positive, powerful conversations about where the church might be going, where God might be calling the church, or might these things stay the same. And what really came of it was the real desire that we need to have these provocative questions, these statements, so that we might garner conversation. We have become a group of people, I think, unfortunately, where we don't have passionate conversations without having challenging things. It's very difficult to have a passionate conversation unless you're Canadian and you're talking about hockey. But we can definitely have those passionate conversations there. But in order for us, it seems these days, to have these really deep conversations where we dig deep and we try hard to find something greater than what we think and what someone else thinks, to find that common ground, or to think, to do more than scratch the surface. We don't seem to do that for just average things anymore. It seems that we have become so bombarded by the absurd and the ridiculous being put out there as fact these days, that we actually have to have statements that are so provocative that they feel absurd for us to engage with them. But the good news is that if we engage with them in good faith, we can actually get down and indeed scratch the surface and get away from the absurd and the ridiculous and enter into a conversation which is much deeper than it was. And one of the great things I learned on Saturday was the affirmation. It wasn't so much that I learned it, was the affirmation that what really needs to happen in the church, in politics, wherever we are, as these provocative statements need to take us back to the grassroots. We need to have these provocative and critical thinking conversations at our kitchen tables, at our coffee tables, at our break room tables at work. We need to take them out of the stratosphere of politicians and leaders and bring it back home, so that right here at the grassroots level, when we're talking about these things that affect our workplaces, our lives, our healthcare, our churches, that we're actually speaking of things that are critical to the average person. And maybe it just is that maybe that's what we need these days. Maybe we need more of these provocative statements. So what provocative statement can you share in your life? What provocative statements can you engage with other people to learn more about yourself and how you feel about things, to think critically, and to help them to share what they think as well? It is only truly when we do that work of engaging in critical thinking with provocative statements, or however we get to those critical thinking moments, it is only when we actually delve into that real, honest, critical thinking that we can discover more about ourselves and our own ideas and opinions and what other people think, and to find out right there at the grassroots level what we have in common and what we don't. Because both of those things are important to who we are as church, as community, as friends and family. So I pray that you will have a provocative statement-filled day, and that you will find many ways to think critically, not to be critical, but to think critically about the world around you. Have a great day, and God bless. I'll see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel.